Do you find it hard to keep people on your webinars or watching your entire piece of content whenever you put something online? If so, it may be because of the way you're teaching. And what I wanted to do in this episode is break down some simple tools that you can use to keep people hooked onto your content so you improve watch time and increase the likelihood that they follow your call to action. So if that's interesting to you, well, keep on listening.
Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the third episode of our series all around conversion messaging. We're just going to get right to the point on this one. Today, what we're going to talk about are different hooks that you can use to hold attention inside of your content. Now, this one's really important because I always say, when you become a better teacher, you actually make more sales. And what I mean by that is when you understand how people learn, what they're going to do with your information, how to develop the content so you can hold their attention. In other words, become a more engaging, better teacher, kind of like a TED Talk versus an encyclopedia. When you can learn to do that, you're not only going to get better results on your content itself, make it more engaging, but you're going to make more sales because people will stick around. Why? Because it's relevant to them, because they're getting ahas, because they're getting something out of it. I can tell you right now that if you can't get people to sit through your content, there's no way in heck you're going to get them to buy your course. So what I want to talk about today is really going to be hooks that keep people on your content. But really what it is how do you become a better teacher? How do you take your skills, your knowledge, your degrees, everything that you know, and transform it into content that holds people's attention? Now, some of the problems you may be experiencing right now, which again may be a little bit obvious, but you're likely the person who's creating content that's not getting watched all the way through. So people aren't even seeing your call to actions. They're not taking your call to actions. They're not clicking on your call to actions or anything like that. The other part of this is people are leaving before you pitch. So maybe it's a webinar or a challenge or a video series. They're not waiting to the end. They're not staying till the end. So that way they never even see your pitch. But again, or it's relevant to just normal content. They never see your call to action. So you're getting really low watch times and things like that. And that, honestly, that's if you can get people to click on it in the first place. And if you want to figure out how to get people to click on your content a little bit more, you should listen to the last episode, which is all about how to create really effective topics and titles. So some of the reasons why this might be happening for you is because you're focused way too much on delivering information. And that is something we've heard inside of this industry for a lot of years is give your best stuff away for free. Provide as much value as you can. And then people automatically assume that value means information. And yeah, delivering information is powerful. It is value adding. But if you do too much of it, it overwhelms people. It tricks people into thinking they have everything they need. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in depth, but when we deliver a lot of really great information, it makes it hard for people sometimes to understand how that information is applied to their specific situation or to them personally. And we need them to be able to make that connection because that's what builds trust in their own ability to follow our process. If you teach something and someone goes, I don't know how that's going to apply to me, how am I going to do that? It feels overwhelming. It creates confusion. But if you teach something and someone goes, yeah, I can see exactly how that applies to me and how I can use that information, how it's going to help me. You give someone that experience, they're going to be way more likely to buy, to stay, to engage, and basically get the result that you want. So teaching too much information sometimes has a negative effect. The other side of this is sometimes people go too deep too soon. So when we start going too deep into topics, we overwhelm people. We lose them. We start talking about things that we think are very value adding and deep and makes us look really smart or sound like we're the authority. But really all it really does is creates more confusion for the audience member because you have to understand they're not at the same awareness level as you. They don't know as much as you, which is why you're the authority, right? You're the expert. So the things that come really easy to you or the thing you can go to the depths, like they're not looking necessarily to go to the depths with you. They might be just looking to get to like step 1, 2, 3, or 4 with you. So you have to take all that into consideration. And a lot of the times what happens is people also like to talk too much about solution. This is what I do, or here's the root cause. So another thing that a lot of people do is they talk about solution or they talk about root cause. And I can tell you right now, if you like right off the bat inside of your content and webinars, and you're like, I'm going to get to the root, I want to show them the root cause, and that's what I'm going to lead with. 90% of the time, I can tell you it's not going to work. Sometimes, yes, your audience's awareness level is ready for the root cause, but there are, I would say the majority of people, the audience is just not ready for the root cause yet. I mean, that's why they still have the major problem and they really have no idea what they need to do to fix it. And so it's because they have no clue what the root cause is and they're not ready to hear it. So, for example, if your kids are triggering you and you have to yell at them to get them to listen, most people think, well, my kids just need to listen. But the root cause is actually just getting rid of your trigger. And that means going through, past your past trauma, healing yourself, all those things. But if I went up to a parent and said, hey, if you don't want to yell at your kids anymore, you got to fix your triggers, to be like, what are you talking about? It's like, well, that's the root cause. Like, I just want my kids to listen, man. Like, what are you I don't want to work on myself. Right. So when we start to look at all of these things, same thing with like health issues. Sometimes people, we've been trained that sometimes with a health issue, we just need a medication, when in fact, maybe it is unresolved um, trauma that we haven't addressed yet. Or maybe it's because we have too much emotional stress going on in our life or whatever it may be. Right. But if someone's coming in to a doctor and they're like, I just have this thing and I want need this medication, and the doctor says, well, we can work on your emotional healing if you want. I'd be like, what are you talking about? I just give me the medication, right? So we have to start using things called bridges. We have to take people from where they're at and build a bridge down to the root cause. And that's another episode for another day. And in fact, we do have an episode on how to build a bridge. If you want to go to our podcast and type in the word bridge, I'm sure you'll find it. But the point that I'm making is that if we start with the root cause, we're going to lose people. So if you want people to stay on your content, you don't want to start with root causes, because even though that's what they need, it's not about what they need. It's about what is going to keep them there. Well, I guess it is about what they need. They do need, you do want to deliver what they need, but I'm telling you right now, they don't need the root cause right now. They're not ready for it. What they need is a little step and then another little step, another one and another one that will eventually get them to the root cause. They don't need the root cause right now. So they eventually will need it, just not right now. And so if you start with it, you're going to start to lose them. So here are some ways that you guys can fix this. So anytime I create a webinar or a training or a piece of content, I'm always looking at where am I going next? So when I'm creating, let's just call it 3 steps on a webinar, and I'm writing step number 1, and I'm going through how I'm going to teach it and how I'm going to present it and all of these things, I'm also thinking, well, what's step number 2? And how can I teach step number 1, but also create excitement for step number 2? And when I'm able to do that, I can pull people through my content much more effectively. So, for example, if I had a webinar and the title was how to create engaging content, and number 1 was like creating effective titles, and number 2 was creating effective teachings. So I would go through and I'd start teaching the title part of it and say, you need this, this, and this. Like you need to put these trigger words in there. But remember, the trigger words are only going to get you the click. When you use trigger words in your teachings, that's where the real magic happens. But for right now, let's just focus on the title. So what I did is just planted a seed. I planted a seed for what I know the next step is going to be. And then what I like to do at the end of the step is sometimes I'll create problems that may happen when they don't have the next step. So I'll say things like, okay, guys, well, now you understand effective titles, but the biggest problem is like once you get people to click on your stuff, what's going to happen if they lose interest in the way you teach? They're probably going to leave, right? So that's why we need number 2. So you create this little like hook right before the next step to bring them into the next step. And I do that for every single part of our webinars or pieces of content or even podcast episodes. I do that sometimes. Okay. So always be selling the next step. Number 2, and this one's a big one. We did an episode on this also on the podcast that you can go back and watch. But there's a difference between teaching information and steps and teaching concepts. Now, what's going to happen, and you're doing this right now, is when you learn something or your audience learns something from you, what they're going to do, automatically their mind is going to take that information and see how it applies to their specific situation. So that's what they're going to do. How does this apply to me and my specific situation? And you need them to be able to figure that out. One of the best and easiest ways to do that is to teach the concept that you want them to understand, and then their mind will figure out, how does this concept apply to me? So let me give you an example. Um, okay, here's an example. So if I needed my audience to understand that how-to content is one of the worst ways to build an audience, right? Like, I just need them to know, like, they're not seeing traction because they're delivering too much information. I have to ask myself, well, what is it? Well, there's perspective shifting content, there's self-identifying content, there's all these different things. And so I ask myself, well, what's the concept here? The concept is that information is not how to build the audience. So what I might say in a webinar is, step number one is that you have to find different ways to create content other than how-to tutorials. And what I'll say is, when we deliver too much information, we can overwhelm people. We can trick them into thinking they have everything they need. And when we look at people like Brene Brown and Simon Sinek, who have really effective content, they're not doing tutorials. When we look at TED Talks, very engaging, they're not doing tutorials. When we look at best-selling books, they're not doing step-by-step tutorials. That's what encyclopedia is. So why are you guys continuing to do these tutorials when everyone else who's getting the results that you want isn't doing those things? And so that's the concept, right? So what I just did right now is I taught the concept that I want them to understand. Now, there's a way to do that, and you want to use a series of stories. You can use metaphors and analogies, which is what I just did there, the book, the encyclopedia, best-selling book, the TED Talk. You can use counterexamples, which is what I did, Brene Brown, Simon Sinek, right? You can't really argue with that. It's true. So story, counterexamples, metaphors, analogies are great ways to prove the concept. And when people understand the concept, it's a lot easier for them to now figure out, how does this apply to my specific situation? And when you can get them to understand how this applies to their specific situation, the likelihood of them trusting their ability to follow your process goes through the roof. But what it also does is give them huge ahas, mind opening moments where, like, my mind is blown, or holy crap, I never saw that before, or whatever. And if you can sprinkle those moments in through your webinars or your content, that's when people really start to get hooked. They start to get hooked because it was like, pow, pow, pow. Just like, whoa, I just never realized that. You just connected so many dots for them that they're going to be hooked on that content. So again, using story, metaphors, things like that. What I also like to do inside of content to keep people hooked is, I also like to hint at what is coming. So sometimes in videos or content, I'll say, hey guys, there's 4 steps today that are going to teach you how to create really effective content. Number 3 has literally changed the game for me. It is what's resulted in 3 million views in the last 12 months. And I wouldn't be able to be where I was today had I not been able to have step number 3. So we'll get there in a second, but let's start with step number 1. So what I did is I just really set the hook for a step that's going to be coming later in the piece of content. And you could do that multiple times if you want, for multiple steps. It really doesn't matter. It's up to you on how you want to do that. But that is another tip that you can use. So those are my tips, my quick tips that you can start to use to become a more effective teacher, keep people hooked on your content, increase watch time, and keep people excited to continue through your content. So again, this is a part of conversion messaging. We will be diving deeper into this on our upcoming 3-day live event called Mastering Your Conversion Messaging. We'll be dropping links. And in fact, you may have heard an ad on this episode with the link to that. So I would strongly recommend that you guys go sign up, register, take a peek at it. Well, don't even take a peek at it. Make sure you're there for all 3 days. But just like the other 2 episodes, we do also have a PDF that goes along with this episode that you can download absolutely for free at learn.brandonlucero.com/CM PDF. That's learn.brandonlucero.com/CM for conversion messaging, CM PDF. Head over there, grab the PDF. You'll also be able to get all the replays of these different episodes. All the information is there for you. So go over there, head there, and I will see you guys next week for the next episode. Take care.
Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.